All right, welcome in. It's the Breer Report for May the 14th. It is schedule release day. We are going to answer some of your schedule release questions because I know you have them, silly as I think a lot of this is, on the schedule release, on the scheduling process. It is a Mailbag Wednesday. And as always, be sure to check out our print mailbag on the mmqb.com where we have more answers to more of your questions. But right here, right now, we're going to get to a few. And we're going to start with Eric Klein, PhD. That's at Dr. Eric Klein. Appreciate you, Eric, being a making recurring appearances in the mailbag. Eric's question for this week: Albert, can you share some insight about the process and amount of input teams can share with the NFL regarding their schedules? For example, can teams request fewer primetime games, or can they request to avoid having games on certain holidays? Now, I would say the answer to that is yes and no. There is a limit to how much they can do, and I do think teams have less power over that than they used to, based on all of the different time slots that the NFL has to fill and all of the different time slots the NFL has created with things like Black Friday, Christmas Day. There are a lot of masters to serve here for the NFL. I like to say everybody's got a boss, and the league office's boss in these sorts of situations is actually probably more so the broadcast partners than it is the teams. Just the reality of the situation when the broadcast partners are paying as much as they're paying to broadcast these games, you're trying to give everybody who's making these huge investments as big a piece of the pie as you possibly can. And it's a lot of people to keep happy. So what will teams ask for? Well, there are a few different things you'll hear on the holiday question. I think they're relatively powerless. One thing they can say is if they've played on holidays a couple of years in a row, please don't put us on this holiday again. A lot of times I think those sorts of requests will be honored. Another one, and these come up sometimes, you'll have where, as from a holiday standpoint, when there's something regionally going on that's important. And, I can remember a few years ago, the Giants asked not to be scheduled on one of the Jewish high holidays, which was, I believe, on a Monday night in the fall. That it happened to them the year before, and it didn't go over great with their fan base. And obviously, there's a large Jewish community in the New York area, so it became an issue for the Giants. So it was something that they had talked to the league about. So there are, I'd say, there's some individual specific requests that can happen based on the circumstances that teams are facing. I don't think so often you can really say, just don't put us on Christmas. I don't think it works that way because obviously everybody would rather not, or at least most people would rather not play on Christmas. Most people would rather not play on Thanksgiving unless you're the Lions or the Cowboys. So, those sorts of like blanket requests, I don't think happen that often. The other thing that you will see is when teams have a big travel year, right? Like let's say it's an AFC East team and they get the two West divisions, or it's an NFC West team and they have the two East divisions. To mitigate some of the travel, sometimes teams will ask, hey, can you put us in back-to-back games on the East Coast or on the West Coast, on the opposite coast, so we can stay out there in between and mitigate the travel a little bit for our coaches and our players. Sometimes those are honored, and teams will do 8-9 day trips to try to, again, mitigate the toll that it takes on the players. Sometimes you'll have teams going over to London, and maybe this team's going from the West Coast. Hey, put us on the East Coast before we play in London. That way we cut a little bit of the time difference off, and we can go acclimate in London straight from the East Coast. So it's more stuff like that I think would be lessening the burden on players, or lessening the burden in some cases on fans. Again, when you're talking about having teams playing on holidays in consecutive years. Although this year we see the Chiefs, of course, are in this situation where they're going to have to play in both Thanksgiving and Christmas a year after playing on Christmas. And part of that, I think, plays into maybe their idea that maybe they could become an annual Christmas team. All right, our second question from Henry Matthews. That's at Henry M. Huss 26H. When it comes to the NFL schedule, is there any one particular game or particular team you are most interested in seeing this season? I mean, I think there are the obvious teams that you're interested in seeing, and they're the best teams in the league, right? You see the Eagles, you want to see the Chiefs, you want to see the Ravens, you want to see the Niners, who've been really good over the years, weren't as good last year. There are obviously some teams with some storylines. You want to see the rookie quarterbacks. So, like, are the Giants more interesting later in the year because there's a better chance that Jackson Dart's going to be in there? The Titans probably more interesting early in the year because it'll be your first chance to get a look at Cam Ward. There's all that stuff you're interested in. The one thing I'm interested in, though, last year it felt like the governor came off. And the NFL had all of these different guidelines, right? Like on how they handle these things and how they handle teams and how they try to care for teams. And the governor came off on a lot of those things last year. They had said, we're not going to play teams 3 games in 10 days. Governor came off on that one for sure. You saw, like, we're not going to play on Christmas if it's on a Tuesday or a Wednesday. Christmas is on a Wednesday. They played a doubleheader on a Wednesday. So in order to, again, satisfy their bosses, the broadcast partners, they are more willing to stretch teams out. And there was some backlash from it last year. And that was from the Jets, who early in the year had to play 3 games in 10 days. And not only do they have to play 3 games in 10 days, they had to play in the West Coast on a Monday night. So you're going to play in San Francisco on Monday night to open the season because they wanted to have Aaron Rodgers in that national television slot. Then they come back and you're getting back to New York, probably pulling in at 7 or 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning. I can't remember what time it was, but your Tuesday's a wash. Then you're playing another road game on Sunday in another time zone against Tennessee. So you're flying out again on the following Saturday. And then after that, you play the Patriots in your home opener on a Thursday night. So 3 games in 10 days with a ton of travel packed into it. And they went 2-1 through it, but those 2 wins were over 2 of the worst teams in the league, maybe arguably the 2 worst teams in the league. And then from there, with a London trip a couple weeks after that, they wind up going 1-9 over their next 10 games. Robert Saleh gets fired a few weeks later. And I think a lot of people in that building would tell you that going through that at the beginning of the year on top of everything else was a huge problem for them. I think the Steelers would probably tell you the same thing about their Christmas experience last year. They were beat up. They were older. They played that, Christmas swing, the Sunday, Saturday, Wednesday swing. And that was in the midst of a big time losing streak for the team. The bleeding really didn't stop until they were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs. And a couple of the Christmas teams last year in Kansas City and Houston wound up resting their players in week 18 as a result of playing that 3-game and 10-day stretch. So there's a lot of evidence out there that teams weren't wild about the way that worked for them and had to do a little bit extra. And in some cases, again, Pittsburgh, the Jets, it took a toll on the teams that really, left a mark and now wound up affecting how their seasons ended. So that's what I'm interested in seeing is are they doing that to any of the teams? Finally, our third question for this week. This is a non-scheduling question. It comes from Derek Nelson. That's @_Derek N. There has been some talk about what it would take for Shane and Daboll to survive 2025 with their brutal schedule. What do you think is the bare minimum required for them to stay? Is it just play Dart at some point and have them look good? Record irrelevant? Derek, I would say the record is not irrelevant because of where they are in their building process. This is the 4th year for Brian Daboll. It is the 4th year for Joe Shane. They've had plenty of time to build a core they feel like they can win with, and they have reason to believe that they are there now. And I like where their roster is in a lot of spots. Like, they've got a lot of the premium positions taken care of. They should be a lot better on offense with Andrew Thomas coming back at left tackle. Again, this is all health permitting. Malik Neighbors in year 2 as the number 1 receiver. Some of the ancillary pieces they have there, maybe they get a little bit more out of Theo Johnson at tight end, Tyron Tracy at running back. And then if you look on the defensive side of the ball, I think they've got a chance to be really good on defense. What they've got up front looks really good. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence, and you add Abdul Carter to that group. That is a really, really good group. And then what you're adding in the secondary, we'll see whether or not they can get Deonte Banks turned around, their former first-round pick. But they add Javon Holland from Miami at safety and Paulson Adebo at corner from the Saints. So this should be a better team. Like, this should not be, again, health permitting, a team where you get through September and October and they're trending towards a 4 or a 5 win season. This should be with just baseline okay at quarterback play, which they hope they can get that out of the veterans, a team that can at least get up around 500. And so then the question becomes, if they are a 500 team, an average team, because of, like you said, the brutal schedule. Does that mean necessarily that that would be it for Shane and Daboll? And I would say no. I think there is a lot of nuance to the way all of that is going to work. Now, if they make the playoffs, I think they're safe. I think that's fair to say. I think it's where they're headed at the end of the year if they don't make the playoffs. In other words, if they go 7-10 and it looks like the team is on the way up, and Jackson Dart is in the lineup and he killed it in December, and the defense is getting after people, and you can look at it, you can hang your hat on it, you can say, okay, this is where they're going. We can see the vision. And yes, the schedule was tough, but this is a team that was playing really good down the stretch. And we'll see how the schedule sets up. But this is a team that was playing really good down the stretch. And you have your young quarterback in place. Like, you would look at that and you would say, we do not want to pull the plug on this. Like, the way that we've developed some of these guys, Dexter Lawrence, one of the best players in football at any position. On defense, you've got some young stars around him. Maybe Abdul Carter is a defensive rookie of the year candidate. You've got Malik Neighbors, 2 years in the system now. You've got your left tackle back in Andrew Thomas. Maybe some of the other pieces on the offensive line are coming along. And most importantly, you've got your quarterback. Then great. If that's what it looks like at 7-10 or 8-9, great. If it's 7-10 or 8-9 and they're limping towards the finish line and Dart hasn't gotten in the lineup, and either Russell Wilson or Jameis Winston is scuffling from week to week, and it doesn't look like there's a lot of direction, well, then that's a different story. So I think it's really hard to give a black and white answer on, like, yes, if this is their record, this is where they're going, this is what they're going to be, and like black and white, like this is what this is the marker that they have to get to for them to save their jobs. I think it's way more nuanced than that. And I think the decision, again, is going to be made on, if they don't make the playoffs, how the direction of the team looks. Like, does it look like this is an ascending team going forward? Appreciate you guys coming out. As always, we love answering your questions here. More of those questions, once again, on the mmqb.com and the print edition of the mailbag. We will have one more Breer report coming for you this week, and then another Breer report from Minnesota next week, where we'll be for the owners' meetings. Of course, another mailbag coming next week as well. Keep the questions coming. We appreciate the feedback. You can always get me more feedback on my social channels, at Albert Breer on Twitter, at Albert R. Breer on Facebook, and at Albert_Breer on Instagram. Appreciate you guys coming out. And even though I think it's a little silly, I hope everybody enjoys the schedule release on Wednesday night too.